I always assumed Darlene's cruelty was recreational, just a way to pass the time between bridge games. That changed the night she slid a heavy cream envelope across the dinner table titled, 47 Reasons My Son Should Divorce You. I expected insults about my cooking or my career. Instead, reason number 12 cited a private medical billing code I had never shared with anyone. As I stared at her satisfied smile, I realized this wasn't a breakup letter. It was a dossier. The drive to Darlene Harrow's house always felt like a physical ascent, not just because the property sat on the highest ridge overlooking the shimmering expanse of Lake Michigan, but because the air seemed to get thinner the closer we got to her front door. My husband, Grant, drove with one hand on the wheel of his truck, humming along to a classic rock station, completely oblivious to the fact that my stomach was tying itself into complex nautical knots. We had been married for 5 years, and for 5 years, I had been auditing my own behavior in real time. I was 33 years old, a senior consultant at Redwood and Vail, a woman who managed multi-million-dollar implementation strategies for logistics companies. Yet in this zip code, I was simply the woman who was not quite what Darlene Harrow had in mind. "You look nice," Grant said, glancing over at me. "You are quiet, though. Everything okay?" I smoothed the fabric of my dress. It was a navy sheath, conservative, high-necked. I had bought it specifically because it was impossible to criticize. It was a shield made of polyester blend. "I am fine," I lied. "Just tired. It has been a long week with the merger project, and then the quarterly review at your dad's shop." Grant nodded, his eyes back on the road. "Mom is really excited about tonight. She keeps calling it a unity dinner. I think she really wants to turn a page." Viv. She invited Aunt Carol and that woman from the city council, Judith Vance. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. A family dinner was one thing. A family dinner with a local politician and extended relatives was a performance. Darlene did not do casual entertaining. If there was an audience, there was a script. "Why Judith Vance?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh, you know Mom," Grant said, turning onto the long paved driveway that wound through the manicured oaks leading to the main house. "She likes to mix business with pleasure. She thinks having a councilwoman there makes the pot roast taste better." He laughed at his own joke. I did not. The house was a sprawling colonial revival that looked like it had been built to intimidate the neighbors. The windows were gleaming. The landscaping was surgically precise, and standing on the front porch, wearing a cashmere cardigan the color of old money, was my mother-in-law. "Showtime," Grant whispered, squeezing my knee before killing the engine. The interior of the house smelled of lemon polish and expensive candles. The dining room was already set, the long mahogany table gleaming under the crystal chandelier. Grant was right about the guest list, but he had underestimated the density of the ambush. It was not just Aunt Carol and Councilwoman Vance. It was also Reverend Miller from the First Methodist Church, and 2 of Darlene's Bridge Club friends who looked at me with the sharp, dissecting eyes of crows spotting a shiny object on the highway. "Vivian," Darlene said, approaching me with her arms outstretched but not open. "You made it. We were worried the city traffic would keep you. You know how you get stuck at the office." I forced a smile. "We are right on time." "Darlene, it is 6 o'clock exactly." She patted my arm, a touch that lingered just a second too long. "Of course you are. Punctuality is so important when one has nothing else to offer." She laughed, looking around at the guests to ensure they knew it was a joke. They chuckled on cue. I felt the familiar burn of humiliation start in my chest, but I pushed it down. This was the tax I paid for being married to the heir of Harrow Ridge Fabrication. I took my seat next to Grant, who was already pouring himself a glass of wine, oblivious to the opening salvo. The dinner was an endurance test. The pot roast was dry. The conversation was dominated by Darlene's monologue about the decline of moral standards in Briar Glen, and every few minutes, the conversation would pivot to me. Not to include me, but to examine me. Judith Vance leaned forward, her pearls clicking against the table edge. "Grant tells me you are still commuting into the city for that consulting job. Vivian, it must be so hard to keep a home running when you are gone 12 hours a day. I dabbed my mouth with the linen napkin. We managed just fine. Judith, Grant and I have a system. And my income has been helpful for the renovations on our own house. Darlene set her fork down with a deliberate clatter. Renovations, she sighed. That implies improvement, doesn't it? I drove by your place yesterday. The grass looked a bit high, but I suppose when you are chasing a career, the domestic details just slip away. Grant finally looked up from his plate. The grass is fine, Mom. I am mowing it tomorrow. Darlene smiled at him. A look of pure, concentrated pity. You are so loyal. Grant, it is your best quality, and your most dangerous one. The table went quiet. Reverend Miller cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the upcoming charity drive, Darlene suggested, but her eyes stayed locked on me. Or perhaps we should discuss reality. She stood up. Darlene Harrow was not a tall woman, but she commanded the room with the gravitational pull of a dying star. She walked to the sideboard and picked up a thick cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax. She held it with both hands, like a scripture or a death warrant. I have been doing a lot of praying lately, Darlene announced, her voice trembling with a theatrical vibrato. Praying for my son, praying for the future of Harrow Ridge, and I have realized that silence is not love. Sometimes, love is pointing out the rot before it brings down the whole house. Grant put his fork down. Mom, what are you doing? I am being a mother. Grant, she said. She turned to the guests. I invited you all here because you are the people who care about this family. You are witnesses to the truth. She walked around the table and stopped behind my chair. I could smell her perfume, lilac and rubbing alcohol. She dropped the heavy envelope onto my empty bread plate. It landed with a thud that echoed in the silence. I wrote something down. Darlene said, because if I just say it, you will twist my words. You always do. So I wrote it down. I looked at the envelope. In elegant calligraphy, right across the front, were the words, 47 reasons my son should divorce you. The room seemed to tilt. I looked at Grant. His mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. I looked at Judith Vance, who was studiously examining her water glass. Open it, Darlene urged. Read it to us. Vivian, or are you afraid of what it says? I am not reading this, I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. Then I will. Darlene snapped. She snatched the envelope back, broke the seal with a sharp crack, and pulled out a stack of high-quality bond paper. She adjusted her reading glasses. Reason number 1. She read clearly. She is emotionally cold and withholds affection to manipulate outcomes. Reason number 2. She prioritizes her mid-level corporate career over the legacy of the Harrow family. Reason number 3. She is socially embarrassing and lacks the etiquette required for a family of our standing. Mom, stop it, Grant said, half rising from his chair. This is insane. Sit down. Grant, Darlene barked. The snap in her voice was so sharp he actually sank back down. I am doing this for you. You are too blind to see it. Reason number 4. She is selfish with her time. Reason number 5. She has alienated you from your childhood friends. I sat frozen. It was a nightmare. It was the scene in a movie where the protagonist wakes up naked in school, except I was fully clothed and surrounded by the pillars of the community. But as Darlene continued to read, dragging out reasons about my cooking, my dress sense, and my laugh, a strange sensation washed over me. It was not just shame, it was confusion. Reason number 9. Darlene read, she is financially secretive. Reason number 10. She is fundamentally unstable. I reached out and took the papers from her hand. I did not snatch them. I just took them. The movement was so calm it surprised both of us. I am done listening to this, I said. I looked down at the page in my hand, intending to crumple it, but my eyes caught a line of text near the middle of the page. My breath hitched. I stared at the paper. I had seen Dr. Thorne for anxiety once, 2 years ago. I had paid the copay with my personal debit card. The billing code was technical data. How did she have the code? I scanned down the page, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The insults about my personality gave way to rigid, specific accusations. Reason number 23. She was the subject of a confidential human resources mediation at Redwood and Vale regarding the Peterson account on August 3rd. A woman who cannot get along with coworkers cannot be a wife. The Peterson mediation. That was a closed-door meeting. I had signed a non-disclosure agreement. There was no public record. I had not even told Grant the details. Only that I had a rough day. I flipped to the next page. Reason number 34. She maintains a separate safe deposit box at Briar Glen Community Bank. Box number 402, concealing assets from the marriage. I did have that box. It held my grandmother's jewelry and my birth certificate. I had opened it 6 years ago, before I even met Grant. I had never mentioned it because it was not a secret. It was just irrelevant. I looked up. Darlene was smiling, a tight, triumphant expression that did not reach her eyes. "Truth hurts, doesn't it?" she asked. I stood up. The chair legs scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me," I said. "Vivian." "Sit down," Grant said, reaching for my hand. "Just ignore her. She is just being dramatic." I pulled my hand away. I said, "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." I walked out of the dining room, keeping my back straight, clutching the sheaf of papers. I could feel their eyes on me. I could hear Darlene's voice picking up right where she left off, listing reason number 15 to the captivated audience. I went into the powder room off the hallway and locked the door. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the pages into the sink. I turned on the faucet to cover the sound of my breathing, which was coming in ragged gasps. I laid the pages out on the marble vanity. Under the harsh vanity lighting, the document looked even more official. It was not a handwritten letter. It was a typed, formatted report. I pulled my phone from my clutch and started taking photos. Click, page 1, click, page 2, click, page 3. I zoomed in on the paragraph about the insurance claim denial from last winter. They had the exact date of the rejection letter. They quoted the reason for denial verbatim. Insufficient evidence of pre-existing condition. This was not gossip. This was a file. Someone had run a background check on me. Someone had accessed my medical records. Someone had called my employer. I reached the last page. I was about to fold them up when I noticed something at the very bottom of the paper. In the footer, it was faint, gray text, the kind automatically generated by word processing software. Template, HR, _ disciplinary, _ form _ V, 4.2. Harrow Ridge Fabrication. Internal use only. The room spun. This was not written on Darlene's personal stationery. This document had been created using the internal template of my husband's company. Harrow Ridge Fabrication. I stared at the mirror. My face was pale, my lipstick stark against my skin. I did not look like a woman who was about to cry anymore. I looked like a woman who had just realized there was a stranger in her house. I folded the papers carefully and tucked them into my purse. I unlocked the door. When I returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. The guests looked uncomfortable, studying their dessert bowls. Darlene was sipping her wine, looking victorious. Grant looked miserable, his head in his hands. "I am leaving," I said. Grant stood up immediately. "I will drive you." "No," Darlene said. "Grant, you stay. We have dessert. Vivian can take the car service. I am driving my wife home." "Mom," Grant said, his voice finding a shred of backbone. We walked out to the truck in silence. The night air was cool, but I was sweating. We drove halfway down the driveway before Grant spoke. "I am so sorry." "Viv," he said, "you know how she is. She gets something in her head and she spirals. It doesn't mean anything." I turned in my seat to face him. The darkness of the cab made it hard to see his eyes. "Grant," I said, "she had my medical billing codes." "What?" She quoted a billing code from Dr. Thorne. She knew about the mediation at my job. She knew about the safe deposit box at the community bank. Grant gripped the steering wheel tighter. His knuckles were white. "She is just guessing. Viv, you know how small this town is. People talk." Maybe she saw you coming out of the doctor's office and made up the rest. I stared at him. People talk about billing codes. People gossip about the specific number of a safe deposit box I opened 6 years ago. Grant did not answer immediately. He stared at the road, the yellow lines flashing by. Mom has friends, he said finally. She probably asked around. It is an invasion of privacy. I agree. I will talk to her. I will tell her it is unacceptable. But he didn't look shocked. That was the thing that made my blood run cold. He looked embarrassed. He looked weary. But he did not look surprised that his mother possessed intimate, legally protected details about his wife's life. How did she get the HR info? Grant, I asked, that is confidential corporate data. I don't know, he said. It sounded almost like a plea. I honestly don't know. Vivian, he was lying. Or if he wasn't lying, he was refusing to look at the truth. We got home to our quiet, suburban colonial. I walked straight to the bedroom, took off the navy dress, and changed into sweats. I could hear Grant downstairs, turning on the TV, opening a beer. He was retreating. He wanted to pretend the night had just been an awkward social encounter, not a forensic dissection of our marriage. I went into the guest room, which I used as a home office, and closed the door. I sat down at my desk and took out my phone. I scrolled through the photos I had taken in the bathroom. I needed a sanity check. I dialed Tessa Marlowe. Tessa was my best friend from college. She lived 3 hours away in Indianapolis and worked as a compliance officer for a major healthcare network. She was the most logical, unsentimental person I knew. She answered on the second ring. Please tell me you are calling to say you have fled the country. She said, something happened. I said, I told her everything. I told her about the dinner, the guests, the envelope. I read her the specific reasons, the billing code, the HR file, the bank box. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Vivian, Tessa said, her voice dropping an octave. This is not a mother-in-law problem. What do you mean? Listen to the language, she said. Insufficient evidence of pre-existing condition. Withholds affection to manipulate outcomes. Financially secretive. This isn't how a jealous mother talks. This is how a lawyer talks. I felt a shiver go down my spine. What are you saying? I am saying she is building a dossier, Tessa said. These aren't insults. They are legal arguments. She is establishing grounds. Grounds for what? I don't know yet. Maybe to challenge a prenup you don't have. Maybe to contest a will. Maybe to prove you are unfit for something. But normal people don't cite billing codes in a dinner table rant. I looked at the photo of the footer again. HR_disciplinary_form_V 4.2. Tessa, I said. The document had a footer from Harrow Ridge Fabrication. Okay, Tessa said, her voice sharp. Listen to me very carefully. You do not confront her. You do not scream at Grant. If they are building a case that you are unstable, every tear you shed, every voice you raise, is going to be used as evidence. Do you understand? I understand. I whispered. Start a folder, she said. Right now. Upload those photos to a cloud account that Grant doesn't have the password to. Document everything. Dates, times, witnesses. If Grant says something suspicious, write it down. But why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why would she do this? We have been married 5 years. We are happy. Are you? Tessa asked. Or does it just look that way on paper? I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark for a long time. Downstairs, I could hear the murmur of the television. My husband was watching a game, drinking a beer. While upstairs, I was realizing that I was the target of an investigation. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder in a private drive. I named it The List. I uploaded the images. I zoomed in on the first page, reading the insults again, forcing myself to process them not as emotional attacks, but as data points. Cold, selfish, career-obsessed. I scrolled to the second page. Medical billing code, F4 1.1. I scrolled to the third page, bank box 402. I got to the last photo, the bottom of the final page. I had been so focused on the footer in the bathroom that I hadn't read the very last reason on the list. I zoomed in. Reason number 41. Her signature never matches twice. I stared at the screen. My stomach dropped through the floor. Her signature never matches twice. That wasn't an accusation of character. That was an observation of fact. And there was only one reason my signature wouldn't match. Because I wasn't the one signing the documents. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The streetlights were humming, casting long shadows across the lawn that Darlene had criticized. I had thought tonight was about humiliation. I realized now it was about erasure. Darlene hadn't written that list to get Grant to divorce me. She had written it to justify something that had already begun. I went back to the bedroom. Grant was already asleep, lying on his back, his mouth slightly open. He looked innocent. He looked like the man I had married. I lay down next to him, but I didn't close my eyes. I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing, wondering if he was a heavy sleeper, or if he was just pretending, waiting for me to make a move so he could report it to his mother. I stared at the ceiling fan cutting through the shadows. Reason number 41. Tomorrow. I was going to find out what exactly I had been signing. The morning after the dinner, the world looked exactly the same, which I found offensive. The sun was shining on the manicured lawns of Briar Glen. The garbage trucks were making their rounds, and the birds were singing with an irritating cheerfulness. Inside my head, however, the landscape had been razed. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, listening to Grant breathe, wondering if the man sleeping next to me was a husband or a sleeper agent. I did not go to work. I called Redwood and Vale and told them I had a family emergency, which was technically the truth. Then I drove 40 minutes to the next town over, a place called Oakhaven, where nobody knew who Darlene Harrow was. I had an appointment with Elias Pruitt at Pruitt & Klein Legal Group. I had chosen him because his website looked boring. No flashy slogans, no promises of aggressive litigation, just a gray background and a list of estate planning credentials. I needed boring. I needed sanity. Elias Pruitt was a man in his 60s with a face that looked like it had been eroded by decades of reasonable objections. He sat behind a desk piled high with manila folders, wearing a cardigan that had seen better decades. "Mrs. Bryant," he said, gesturing to the leather chair opposite him. "You mentioned on the phone that you had concerns regarding identity theft and potential harassment." I sat down, clutching my purse. I had printed the photos of the list at a 24-hour copy shop on the way over. I did not want to send them via email. I did not trust the cloud anymore. It is a complicated situation. "Mr. Pruitt," I said, "I am not here to discuss a separation or anything domestic. I am here because I believe someone is using my personal information to build a narrative against me." I slid the stack of photos across the desk. Elias put on a pair of reading glasses that hung from a chain around his neck. He picked up the first page. He read in silence. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner, and the occasional rustle of paper as he flipped through the images of Darlene's cruelty. He did not gasp. He did not look shocked. He read the list with the clinical detachment of a mechanic listening to a rattling engine. When he finished, he stacked the papers neatly and folded his hands on top of them. "Who prepared this document?" he asked. "My mother-in-law." I said, "She presented it at a dinner party." Elias raised a single, bushy eyebrow. "Mrs. Bryant." "I have been practicing law for 40 years. I have seen angry letters. I have seen rambling manifestos written in crayon. This is neither." He tapped the paper with his index finger. "Look at the phrasing," he said. "Inability to maintain fiscal consistency, documented history of erratic social behavior, medical evidence of instability. These are not grievances. These are evidence headings." "What does that mean?" I asked, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "It means this was not written to hurt your feelings," he said. "It was written to satisfy a burden of proof. Specifically, it reads like the outline for a petition to remove someone from a position of trust, or perhaps a custody challenge, though you did not mention children. We don't have children. I said. Elias nodded. Then it is likely financial or reputational. Tell me, Mrs. Bryant. Look at reason number 41. I knew it by heart. Her signature never matches twice. Precisely. Elias said. That is a very specific allegation, in my experience. When someone accuses you of having an inconsistent signature, they are usually preparing to explain why a signature on a document you never saw does not look like yours. They are preemptively discrediting your handwriting analysis. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do I do? I asked. Elias leaned back. You stop treating this like a family squabble. You treat it like a forensic audit. First, you need to place a fraud alert with all 3 major credit bureaus immediately. Second, you need to request copies of every single document that bears your name in connection with your husband's family business. And third, you need to stop talking. Stop talking? Do not confront the author of this list. Elias said. Do not argue with your husband about the specifics if they are building a case that you are unstable. Every emotional reaction you have will be documented. You need to be a statue. Mrs. Bryant, a statue that takes excellent notes. I left his office feeling heavier than when I arrived. Elias had confirmed my worst fear. This was not about Darlene hating me. This was about Darlene erasing me. I sat in my car in the parking lot and opened my laptop. I connected to the hotspot on my phone, bypassing the public Wi-Fi. I went to the credit bureau website. My hands were shaking as I typed in my social security number. I paid the fee for the expedited full report. It took 30 seconds to generate. I watched the loading circle spin, feeling like I was waiting for a biopsy result. The report popped up. At first glance, it looked normal. My student loans were there, paid off, the mortgage on our house, the car lease. But then I scrolled down to the section labeled Commercial and Business Liability. There, sitting at the bottom of the list, was a line of credit opened 4 months ago. Creditor: Harrow Ridge Vendor Services. Borrower: V. A. Bryant. Status: active. Limit: $50,000. Balance: $2,000. I stared at the screen. I had never signed for a business line of credit. I didn't even use my middle initial. Anne. On legal documents, I always signed as Vivian Bryant. V. A. Bryant. It sounded like a stranger. I took a screenshot. Then I closed the laptop and drove home. Grant was in the kitchen when I walked in. He had come home for lunch, which was unusual. He was making a sandwich at the counter, looking aggressively casual. Hey, he said, not looking at me. I was worried. You weren't at work. I took a breath. Be a statue, Elias had said. I had a migraine. I lied. I just drove around for a bit to clear my head. Grant turned around, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked relieved. I am glad you are back, he said. Listen, about last night, Mom feels bad. She called me this morning. She knows she went overboard. She is under a lot of stress with the company expansion. I put my purse down on the island. I looked at my husband. He had the kind of face that voters trusted. Open, symmetrical, boyish. I wondered if he knew about the $50,000 credit line, or if he was just another pawn on Darlene's chessboard. Grant, I said softly, I was looking at our finances today. Just routine stuff. He froze. It was subtle. Just a pause in the way he folded the towel. But I saw it. Oh? He said. I saw a credit line opened 4 months ago. I said, under the name V. A. Bryant, connected to Harrow Ridge. Do you know anything about that? Grant laughed. It was a nervous, airy sound. Oh, that, he said. Yeah, that is just a bookkeeping thing. Dad's accountant suggested we open a vendor line for the spouses of the partners. For tax purposes. You know, write-offs for travel and dinners. I watched him carefully, but I didn't sign for it. Grant? He shrugged. I probably signed for you. Just to speed things up. You were busy with that big project in Chicago back then. I didn't want to bother you with paperwork. You signed my name? I asked. I signed for you, he said, correcting me. It is standard. Mom does it for Dad all the time. My mom wouldn't do anything shady. Viv, he added quickly. That phrase, "My mom wouldn't, not I wouldn't." He was defending her before I had even accused her. "Grant," I said, keeping my voice level. Reason number 41 on her list was that my signature never matches. Why would she write that if she knew you were signing for me? Grant's face flushed. A blotchy red stain crept up his neck. "You are reading too much into it," he said, his voice rising. She was just ranting. She wrote that list at 2 a.m. after a glass of wine. "It doesn't mean anything. Why are you looking for a conspiracy?" "I am not looking for one." I said, "I am holding one." I walked out of the kitchen before he could see my composure crack. I went upstairs and locked the bedroom door. I stood in front of the mirror and practiced my neutral face. I smoothed my hair. I could not cry. Crying was evidence of instability. I waited until Grant went back to work before I left the house again. I had one more stop to make. Briar Glen Community Bank was a small, red brick building on Main Street that smelled of stale coffee and money. I had banked there since I moved to town. The tellers knew me. They gave lollipops to the customers' kids and knew everyone's gossip. I walked to the front desk. Mrs. Gable was working. She was a stern woman with steel gray hair who had been the head teller since the 80s. "Hello, Mrs. Gable." I said, "I need to access my safe deposit box, box 402. Mrs. Gable looked up. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Oh, hello. Vivian. Of course." She didn't reach for the master key immediately. She typed something into her computer. "I just need to verify the signature card." She said, "New policy." I waited. My heart was hammering against my ribs. She stared at the screen for a long time. "Vivian," she said, not looking at me, "the system shows that box requires 2 keys for access now. Or rather, it is listed as a joint tenancy with right of survivorship." I gripped the counter. "Joint with whom?" I asked, though I already knew. "Mrs." Gable cleared her throat. "With Darlene Harrow." The room seemed to tilt. That box contained my personal letters, my grandmother's sapphire ring, and the deed to a small plot of land my father had left me in Kentucky. Private things. "When was she added?" I asked. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. Mrs. Gable squinted at the screen. "About 6 months ago. The paperwork was filed. Well, it looks like it was filed by Mr. Harrow's office. By Grant? Or his father?" "I am not sure," she said, "but the signature card has both your names. I want to see the access log." I said, "I want to see every time that box has been opened in the last 6 months." Mrs. Gable finally looked at me. Her eyes were sympathetic, but also frightened. In Briar Glen, crossing Darlene Harrow was a bad career move. "Vivian," she said quietly, "access logs have to be requested through the records department now. It takes 3 to 5 business days." I leaned in. "Mrs. Gable, I am standing right here. You have the log in that binder behind you. I have seen you use it." She took a step back. "I can't. Vivian, I really can't. Please don't ask me to." She was afraid. That terrified me more than the list. If Darlene Harrow could terrify a bank teller into violating protocol, what else could she do? I forced a smile. It felt like stretching rubber. "I understand. Mrs. Gable, I will submit a formal request." I walked out of the bank into the bright afternoon sun. I felt exposed. I felt like the buildings on Main Street were watching me. I sat in my car and called Tessa. I told her about the lawyer, the credit line, and the bank box. "Okay," Tessa said. She sounded like she was typing furiously. "I have been looking at the HR language from the photos you sent. And? Vivian, this isn't just generic corporate speak." She said, "Phrases like remedial interpersonal intervention and failure to adhere to hierarchy protocols. These are verbatim from the disciplinary templates used by Redwood and Vail." "My company?" I asked. "No," Tessa said, "but they are standard across the industry for large firms. However, I ran a search on the phrase Level 4 compliance breach, which appeared in reason number 22. That is specific. Do you know who uses that terminology?" "No. Northbridge Reputation Partners." Tessa said, "Who are they?" They are a crisis management firm based in Chicago. They handle PR for politicians caught in scandals and CEOs accused of embezzlement. They clean up messes, and they specialize in what they call aggressive narrative correction. My blood ran cold. Darlene hired a crisis firm? I asked. I did some digging on Darlene's social calendar. Tessa said, she has been having lunch every Tuesday at the club with a man named Marcus Vane. He is a senior consultant at Northbridge. Why? I whispered. Why would she need a crisis firm to deal with a daughter-in-law? Tessa paused. That is the million-dollar question. Viv, you don't hire Northbridge to deal with a divorce. You hire them to deal with a war, or a merger, or a takeover. They are setting you up as a liability. Social pressure first, I said. Remembering Elias's words, legal pressure second? Exactly, Tessa said. If they can paint you as unstable, financially reckless, and a security risk, they can discredit anything you say. Vivian, what do you know that they don't want you to know? I don't know anything, I said. I just go to work and come home. There has to be something, she insisted. Go through that list again, every line. It is a map. I hung up. I needed to go to the Harrow Ridge office. I had a scheduled quarterly meeting with the leadership team regarding the logistics consulting I did for them. I couldn't skip it. It would look weak. I drove to the industrial park where Harrow Ridge Fabrication occupied 3 massive steel buildings. It was a successful company, making specialized parts for agricultural machinery. Grant's grandfather had built it, and Darlene acted like she was the queen of this kingdom. I walked into the conference room. Grant was there, along with his father, Robert, and the VP of Operations, a man named Ken. Darlene was not there. Hello, everyone, I said, taking my usual seat. Robert Harrow gave me a tight smile. He was a quiet man, completely dominated by his wife, usually hiding behind his reading glasses. Hi, Vivian, he said. We have a light agenda today. We went through the standard reports, shipping delays, supply chain issues. It was numbingly normal. Then, at the end of the meeting, Ken cleared his throat. Oh, one administrative thing. Vivian, Ken said, we are streamlining our vendor accounts, just to make the auditing process faster. We removed you as a co-signer on the logistics account, since you are an external consultant. Compliance thought it was better to keep signing authority internal. He slid a paper across the table. It was a notification of removal of authority. Just need you to initial that you received the notice, he said. For efficiency. I looked at the paper. Efficiency. That was the word Grant had used. I looked at Grant. He was studying his pen. Does this affect my contract? I asked. No, Robert said quickly. Just housekeeping. I picked up the pen. If I refused to sign, I would look difficult. Obstructionist. Reason number 18. I initialed the paper. I realized then that I was being fired, not from my job, but from the family. They were stripping my clearance. One form at a time. I walked out of the meeting feeling hollow. Grant caught up with me in the parking lot. Viv. Wait, he said. I turned. Are we okay? He asked. You have been so distinct. Distinct? I asked. Distant, he corrected. Sorry. Distant. I looked at his shoes. Expensive leather loafers. I am fine. Grant. Just tired. I got into my car and locked the doors. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A notification. You have a new email. I picked it up. The sender was truthteller402protonmail.com. An anonymous, encrypted account. 402 was my safe deposit box number. My thumb hovered over the screen. I opened the email. There was no subject line. The body of the email was just 2 sentences. If you want to understand the 47 reasons, check reason 12. It's not about you. I frowned. Reason 12 was the medical code. I had read it. I had stressed over it. I opened the photo gallery on my phone and found the picture of page 1. I zoomed in on reason 12. Reason number 12. Her medical history indicates a pattern of stress-induced hysteria, specifically noted in billing code F41.1 from her visit to Dr. Eris Thorne on November 14th. I stared at it. November 14th. November 14th of last year. I closed my eyes, trying to access my memory. November 14th. That was a Tuesday. I was in Chicago for the Peterson merger. I remembered it clearly because my flight had been delayed, and I had spent 6 hours in the terminal eating stale pretzels. I was in Chicago on November 14th. I had not gone to Dr. Eris Thorne on November 14th. I couldn't have. I was 200 miles away. So why was there a billing code? I looked at the photo again. The text continued onto a second line that I had skimmed over in the bathroom because my hands were shaking so hard. Code F4 1.1 from her visit to Dr. Eris Thorne on November 14th. Following incident at Larkspur Heights Motel. Larkspur Heights Motel. I stopped breathing. Larkspur Heights was a rundown area on the outskirts of the county. I had never been to a motel there. I had never been to a motel in this town. Period. I lived here. It's not about you. If I wasn't at the doctor, and I wasn't at the motel, then who was? And who used my insurance to pay for the aftermath? I looked at the anonymous email address again. Truthteller402. Someone knew about the box. Someone knew about the list. And someone was trying to tell me that the lies weren't just lies. They were cover-ups. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going home. I was going to Larkspur Heights. I needed to see the place where I had allegedly lost my mind on November 14th. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody streaks across the sky. The game had changed. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was hunting. Larkspur Heights was not a town so much as a collection of regrets paved over with cracked asphalt. It sat on the edge of the county, a place where trucking routes intersected and streetlights flickered with an ominous, irregular rhythm. The Larkspur Inn was a single-story, U-shaped building painted a color that might have been beige in the 90s, but was now the hue of a nicotine stain. I parked my sedan between a rusted pickup truck and a dumpster. My heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a stark contrast to the numbness that had settled over my limbs. I checked my reflection in the rear-view mirror. I looked professional. I looked sane. I looked like a woman who had simply taken a wrong turn on her way to a board meeting, not a woman hunting for the ghost of herself. The lobby smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. The man behind the plexiglass partition was watching a small television mounted in the corner. He didn't look up when the bell on the door chimed. "Excuse me," I said. He turned slowly. He was heavy-set, with eyes that had seen everything and found none of it interesting. "Can I help you?" "I need to ask about a reservation from last year." I said, "November 14th. He laughed, a dry, wheezing sound. "Lady, we don't keep records that long. Computer wipes every 90 days. Privacy policy." I placed my hands on the counter. They were steady. "I have reason to believe a room was booked here under the name V. Bryant," I said, "and I have been advised by my legal counsel that destroying records relevant to an ongoing identity fraud investigation is a felony." The word felony made him blink. He looked at me properly for the first time. He saw the expensive cut of my blazer, the serious set of my jaw. He reached for a keyboard. What was the name again? Bryant. I said, "V. Bryant." He typed with 2 fingers, the keys clacking loudly in the quiet room. "Yeah, I got it," he said. "November 14th, room 12. Checked in at 3 in the afternoon. Checked out the next morning at 9. I need the security footage from that day." I said, "I told you," he said, leaning back. "Footage is gone. Loop records over itself every 30 days. I felt a surge of desperation. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Is there a backup? An archive?" He looked at me with a strange expression. It wasn't annoyance anymore. It was recognition. "You know, you are the second person to ask about that specific date," he said. My stomach dropped. "Who was the first?" "Some guy," he said. "Came in about 4 months ago. Suit, polite. Said he was a private investigator looking into an insurance claim. Did you give him the footage?" "He paid for a copy of the hard drive back then," the manager said. "So yeah, he got it. 4 months ago. Darlene had been planning this since before Christmas. While I was wrapping gifts for her, while I was ordering her favorite poinsettias, someone was here, buying the evidence of a crime I didn't commit. Can I see the receipt?" I asked. "For the room?" He hesitated, then hit a button. a dot matrix printer under the counter whirred to life. He ripped off the paper and slid it through the slot. I picked it up. Guessed. V. Bryant. Rate. $65. Payment. Visa ending in 4419. I stared at the numbers. 4419. None of my cards ended in those digits. I didn't even have a Visa. I used MasterCard. I looked at the bottom of the receipt. There was a signature. Vivian Bryant. It was a scrawl. A shaky, jagged imitation of my handwriting. It looked like someone had practiced my signature 5 times and then signed it while driving over a pothole. "Can I keep this?" I asked. "Take it," he said. "I don't want any trouble." I walked back to my car. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I held the receipt against the steering wheel. This was proof. Not that I was crazy, but that I was being framed. Someone had come here, used a fake card, signed my name, and then Darlene had sent a man to collect the video evidence of, what, a woman in a wig? A blonde woman who looked enough like me from a grainy security camera angle to convince a judge? I drove home in silence. I didn't play the radio. I needed to hear my own thoughts. The next morning, I met with Elias Pruitt again. I laid the motel receipt on his desk. He picked it up with tweezers, which I thought was dramatic, until I realized he was treating it like a biological specimen. "This is good," Elias said. "This is a discrepancy. But Mrs. Bryant, you need to stop doing this." "Doing what?" I asked. "Investigating?" "Chasing," he corrected. "You are reacting to their breadcrumbs. You went to the motel because of the email. You went to the bank because of the list. You are letting them lead you around. What else am I supposed to do?" "Build a wall," he said. "A clean chain of evidence. We need formal logs. We need third-party verification. You cannot just run around town confronting motel managers. You need to send written requests for information. You need to create a paper trail that shows you are the rational party seeking truth, not the frantic wife seeking vindication." He leaned forward. "And you need to prepare yourself for what is in that safe deposit box," he said. "If they went to the trouble of forging a motel stay, the box is not going to be empty." "I know." I said. "I went to the bank at 10 o'clock. I didn't go alone. I brought a notary public I had hired from a service in the city, a woman named Brenda who looked like she took nonsense from no one. I wanted a witness who didn't live in Briar Glen." Mrs. Gable looked pale when she saw me. "I would like to access my box now," I said, "and I would like to introduce Brenda, who will be witnessing the inventory of the contents." Mrs. Gable nodded stiffly. "Follow me." The vault was cool and smelled of old paper and copper. My box, number 402, was eye level. Mrs. Gable inserted her key. I inserted mine. The lock turned with a heavy click. She slid the long metal box out and carried it to a private viewing room. She set it on the table and left us alone. Brenda took out a notepad. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. My hands were trembling, so I clasped them together. I opened the lid. The first thing I saw was my grandmother's sapphire ring. It was still there in its velvet box. I felt a flash of relief, followed by a wave of nausea. They hadn't stolen anything. That would be too simple. Underneath the jewelry box was a stack of papers. Item 1, Brenda narrated. Her pen scratching across the pad. A copy of an employment contract for Redwood and Vale Consulting, dated 3 years ago. Why was my contract here? I had the original in my filing cabinet at home. Item 2. Brenda continued. A printed email thread. Subject line, "Concerns about Mom." I froze. That was an email I had sent to Grant 2 years ago. After Darlene had made a particularly cruel comment about his weight, I had written, "I am worried your mother is projecting her insecurities onto you. It is not healthy." Here it was, printed out, stored like a weapon. Item 3, Brenda said, a manila folder. Label reads, "Contingency, guardianship." The air left the room. "Guardianship?" I whispered. I reached for the folder. My fingers felt numb. I opened it. I expected to see documents about Darlene, or maybe a hypothetical child, but the name at the top of the petition was mine. Petition for appointment of guardian of estate and person. Proposed ward. Vivian Ann Bryant. I read the first paragraph, alleging that the proposed ward is unable to manage her financial and personal affairs due to escalating psychological distress, specifically severe anxiety and paranoid delusions. I flipped the page. There was a typed note clipped to the draft. It wasn't signed, but I recognized the font. It was the same font as the 47 Reasons. Note: have Dr. Thorne confirm anxiety impact on decision-making. Need incidents of public outbursts. November 14th, motel incident establishes pattern of erratic departure from marital home. I dropped the folder. It slid across the table, scattering the pages. Brenda looked at me. Her professional mask slipped. "Ma'am?" she asked softly. "Do you want me to log this?" I stared at the papers. This wasn't a divorce. Divorce was about splitting assets. Divorce was about who gets the house. This was about who gets me. They were planning to declare me incompetent. They wanted to take control of my finances, my medical decisions, my life. If they could prove I was unstable, using the fake motel stay, the billing codes, the list of my so-called flaws, they could petition the court to appoint a guardian. And who would the guardian be? Grant? Darlene? I felt a scream building in my throat. Hot and jagged. I wanted to tear the room apart. I wanted to smash the table, be a statue. Elias had said. I took a deep breath. It shuddered in my chest. "Yes, Brenda," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. "Please log every single page. Take photos, and then we are going to put it all back exactly how we found it." "Why?" Brenda asked. "Because I need them to think I haven't seen it yet," I said. I left the bank with a copy of Brenda's inventory log tucked into my bra. I walked to my car. I sat there for 20 minutes, just breathing, in, out, in, out. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a target. I drove to Darlene's house. I didn't call first. I knew she would be there. It was Tuesday. She would be home from her lunch, planning her next move. I pulled into the long driveway. The house looked beautiful in the afternoon light. A monument to old money and bad intentions. I walked up the steps and rang the bell. The housekeeper, Maria, answered. She looked surprised. "Mrs. Harrow is in the sunroom," she said. I walked through the house. I knew the way. I had walked these halls for 5 years, thinking I was family. Darlene was sitting in a wicker chair, reading a magazine. She looked up when I entered. She didn't smile. "Vivian," she said, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "You missed Sunday brunch." I stood in the doorway. I didn't sit. "I went to the bank today." "Darlene," I said. She turned a page of her magazine. "Did you?" "I found out you are a joint owner on my safe deposit box." Darlene paused. She closed the magazine and set it on the table next to her iced tea. "Grant mentioned you were confused about that," she said. "Confused?" I asked. "I opened that box 6 years ago. Alone." Darlene sighed. She adjusted the pearl necklace at her throat. "We updated the signatory cards last year. Vivian, for safekeeping, you travel so much for work. If something happened to you, a plane crash, an accident, someone needs to be able to access your documents. It was a practical decision. Without my signature?" I asked. Darlene smiled. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. Grant handled the paperwork. She said, "He knows how overwhelmed you get with administrative details. We were just trying to help you." "Dear, help me?" I asked, taking a step forward. "By forging my name? By planting a folder about guardianship?" Darlene's eyes narrowed. "If you were a stable woman, Vivian, you wouldn't be this upset," she said. "A stable woman would say thank you for the support. But you always look for the insult. You are paranoid, just like the list says. You wrote the list." "Darlene," I said, my voice rising, "you created the paranoia." Darlene picked up her iced tea. "You are shouting," she observed calmly. Inside my house, I heard the front door open. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Grant walked into the sunroom. He was still in his work clothes. He looked from me to his mother. "What is going on?" he asked. "Vivian is having an episode," Darlene said. She is screaming at me about the bank box. I turned to my husband. Grant, tell her. I said, tell her you didn't sign my name. Tell her you didn't agree to a guardianship petition. Grant looked at me. His eyes were flat. Vivian, lower your voice, he said. I froze. What? You are scaring Maria, he said. You are shouting at my mother. You need to calm down. He didn't deny it. He didn't ask what petition I was talking about. He just told me to be quiet. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his chin, the way he stood slightly behind the furniture as if shielding himself. He wasn't caught in the middle. He was on her side. He had always been on her side. And then I heard the trap click shut. They wanted me to scream. They wanted me to throw the iced tea. They wanted Maria to testify that Vivian Bryant came into the house and acted violently. Reason number 10. She is fundamentally unstable. I took a deep breath. I imagined a switch in my brain, a circuit breaker that controlled my rage. I flipped it off. I am not shouting. Grant, I said. My voice was terrifyingly even. I am asking a question. We can discuss this at home. Grant said, come on. I will drive you. You look flushed. I am perfectly fine to drive. I said. I turned back to Darlene. Thank you for clarifying the arrangement. Darlene, I said. Darlene looked disappointed. She had wanted fireworks. I gave her ice. I walked out of the house. I walked past Grant without looking at him. I got into my car and backed out of the driveway. As soon as I was on the main road, I pulled over. I took out my phone. I opened the voice memo app. Record. January 20th, 3:15 p.m. I said to the empty car. Confronted Darlene Harrow about the safe deposit box. She admitted to being added for safekeeping but claimed Grant handled the paperwork. When I mentioned the guardianship folder, she deflected and called me paranoid. Grant arrived at 3:12. He did not address the forgery. He only instructed me to lower my voice. He attempted to characterize my behavior as an episode. I remained calm. I did not raise my voice. I stopped the recording. I looked at my face in the rearview mirror. A tear leaked out of my left eye. I wiped it away angrily. I drove home. When I walked into the house, I went straight to the bathroom. I locked the door. I turned on the shower so the noise would cover the sound of my sobbing. I cried for 10 minutes. I cried until my chest ached. I cried for the 5 years I had wasted loving a man who was plotting to legally erase me. Then I turned off the water. I washed my face with cold water. I put on fresh moisturizer. I looked in the mirror. My name is Vivian Bryant. I said to my reflection, I am of sound mind. I am financially solvent. I am not afraid. I said it again and again, until I believed it. I went downstairs. Grant wasn't home yet. I called Tessa. Viv, she said. Picking up on the first ring, I found something. Tell me. I said, I ran a background check on the employees at Northbridge Reputation Partners. She said, the firm Darlene hired, specifically. I looked for connections to Briar Glen. And? They use a freelance IT contractor named Kevin Miller. Tessa said, does that name ring a bell? I thought about it. Miller. He worked at Redwood and Vale 3 years ago. I said, in the tech support department. He fixed my laptop once when the hard drive crashed. Bingo, Tessa said. He was fired for accessing employee emails without authorization. The room spun. He still has a back door? I asked. Or he kept your old passwords? Tessa said. Or he installed a keylogger before he left. Viv, that is how they got the HR language. That is how they got the private emails. It wasn't Darlene hacking you. It was a paid professional who used to work in your building. I sat down on the kitchen floor. The cold tile felt grounding. They paid someone to hack my work email. I said, to find dirt. And when they didn't find enough dirt? Tessa said, they manufactured it. The motel. The credit line. Tessa. I said, I found a folder in the bank box. It was labeled guardianship. There was a long silence on the line. Oh my God, Tessa whispered. They aren't just trying to divorce me. I said, they are trying to conserve me. Like I am a senile old woman. Like I am a child. Vivian. Listen to me, Tessa said. Her voice was fierce. This changes everything. This isn't a civil dispute anymore. This is a conspiracy. You need to get out of that house. I can't. I said, why not? Because if I leave, they will use it. Reason number 12. Erratic departure from marital home. They wrote the script. Tessa, if I run, I am following their stage directions. So what are you going to do? I am going to stay. I said, I am going to eat dinner with him. I am going to sleep in the same bed, and I'm going to record every single word he says. I hung up. I heard Grant's truck pull into the driveway. I stood up. I smoothed my clothes. I walked to the fridge and took out the ingredients for a salad. When Grant walked in, I was chopping cucumbers. Hey, he said cautiously. He stood in the doorway, waiting for the explosion. Hey, I said. I didn't look up. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. He relaxed, visibly. He thought he had won. He thought I was submitting, that the gaslighting had worked, that I was accepting the narrative that I was just a tired, confused woman who needed rest. I am sorry about Mom, he said, walking over to the fridge to get a beer. She just worries. I know. I said. The knife sliced through the cucumber with a sharp crack. I kept chopping. I wasn't cooking dinner. I was sharpening my focus. The next morning, I was at my desk at Redwood and Vale when my phone rang. It was Elias. Vivian, can you talk? He asked. I closed my office door. Yes, I just got a call from a contact of mine. Elias said. He works in the legal department at your company. My heart stopped. What happened? An anonymous complaint was filed this morning. Elias said. Through the whistleblower hotline. Against whom? Against you. Vivian. I gripped the phone. What does it say? It is vague, Elias said, but it alleges that you have been misusing client funds, specifically, that you have been approving vendor payments to a shell company that you control. I almost laughed. It was so absurd. That is a lie. I said, I don't control any shell companies. I know that. Elias said, and you know that. But an investigation takes time, and while an investigation is pending, standard corporate policy is usually suspension. I finished. Exactly. I looked out the window at the city skyline. They were attacking my income. They knew that a legal battle against the Harrows would be expensive. They wanted to cut off my supply lines. If I lost my job, I lost my money. If I lost my money, I couldn't pay Elias. I couldn't pay for experts. I would be vulnerable. And a woman who just lost her job for fraud looks very unstable to a judge. Vivian? Elias asked. Are you there? I am here, I said. Do you want me to call your HR director? He asked. Try to get ahead of it? No, I said. No? If I panic, I look guilty. I said. I remembered the motel receipt, the forged signature, the credit line. Elias. I said. The credit line at the bank, the one under V. A. Bryant. Yes? Is it connected to a business account? Yes. The vendor account. I bet that is the shell company. I said. I bet they set up the credit line in my name, and now they are accusing me of funneling money to it. They created the crime and the criminal at the same time. That is a distinct possibility. Elias said. And if that is true, it is diabolical. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment. I looked at the framed photo on my desk. It was of me and Grant on our honeymoon in Hawaii. We looked so young, so stupid. I took the photo out of the frame. I fed it into the shredder. Then I opened my email. I started typing a request to the IT department for a full audit of my login history. Darlene thought she was cutting off my resources. She thought that by taking my job, she would take my power. She forgot one thing. I was a consultant. My entire job was fixing broken systems, and the Harrow family was the most broken system I had ever seen. I wasn't going to just defend myself. I was going to dismantle them. I picked up my pen. I started a new list. Reason number 1. They underestimated me. I walked into the conference room at Redwood and Vale at 9 o'clock sharp on Wednesday morning. I was not wearing my usual gray suit. I was wearing a black dress with a sharp architectural neckline, a funeral dress, repurposed for war. Sitting across the table was David Sobek. the head of internal investigations. He was a man who specialized in awkward silences. He had a file open in front of him, and he looked at me with the weary expression of a man who had seen too many good employees make bad decisions. "Mrs. Bryant," Sobek said, "thank you for coming in. I know this is difficult." I placed my leather portfolio on the table. It made a solid, heavy sound. "It is not difficult." "David," I said, "it is necessary." Sobek blinked. He had expected tears. He had expected a plea for mercy. "We received a complaint through the ethics hotline." He began, reciting the script. "It alleges that over the last 6 months, you have authorized duplicate payments to a vendor listed as VRB Logistics, a company that the complaint alleges you hold a beneficial interest in." VRB Logistics, I repeated. VRB, Vivian Rose Bryant. My maiden name was Rose. They were not even trying to be subtle. "Do you have the supporting documentation?" I asked. Sobek hesitated. He slid a stack of stapled papers across the polished wood table. "These are PDFs of the approval logs," he said. "They show your user ID authorizing the transfers." I picked up the papers. I didn't look at the numbers. I looked at the timestamps. "David," I said, keeping my voice conversational, "look at this third transfer. Dated November 14th at 3:30 in the afternoon. Yes?" I pulled a sheet of paper from my portfolio and slid it toward him. "This is a receipt from a motel in Larkspur Heights," I said. "According to this receipt, which was allegedly signed by me, I was checking into a room at exactly 3:30 on November 14th. Sobek frowned. He picked up the receipt. "And this," I continued, sliding another document across, "is a sworn affidavit from the motel manager confirming that the person who stayed there paid with a card ending in 4419. I have also included a letter from my bank confirming I have never held a card with those digits." Sobek looked from the receipt to the transfer log. "So," I said, leaning forward, "either I was approving fraudulent wire transfers from a laptop in a rundown motel room while simultaneously forging my own signature on a credit card I don't own, or there is a problem with your evidence." Sobek adjusted his glasses. "Vivian, user IDs can be spoofed, but it is rare. These logs come from the secure server." "I know," I said. "That is why I had my attorney, Elias Pruitt, hire a forensic data specialist to look at the metadata of the PDF files you were sent." I pulled out the final piece of my packet. It was a technical report, dense with code and highlighting. "The whistleblower didn't send you raw server logs, David. They sent you PDFs of the logs, and whoever created those PDFs didn't scrub the document properties." I pointed to the highlighted line on the report. "Author, admin_terminal_04. Organization, Harrow Ridge Fabrication." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit. "Harrow Ridge," Sobek said quietly. "That is your husband's company." "It is," I said. "And it appears that someone using a computer at my husband's manufacturing plant created a document accusing me of embezzlement, and then submitted it to my employer using an anonymous server." Sobek closed the file. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This is not an internal compliance issue anymore, is it?" he asked. "No," I said. "It is a frame-up, and I'm willing to let Redwood and Vale conduct their investigation. David, in fact, I welcome it, because the deeper you dig, the more you are going to find that the IP addresses don't match my location, the login times don't match my calendar, and the money trail doesn't lead to me." I stood up. "I am going to work from home for the next few days," I said, "to avoid the appearance of interference, but I expect a full update by Friday." Sobek looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't pity anymore. It was respect, tinged with a little bit of fear. "We will be in touch. Vivian." I walked out of the building. My legs were shaking, but my stride was long and purposeful. I made it to my car before I let out the breath I had been holding for 20 minutes. I called Elias. They took the bait. I said, "Sobek knows it is external now." "Good," Elias said. His voice was gravelly and reassuring. "Now we pivot. I filed the request for the document signing audit trail from Harrow Ridge this morning. We framed it as part of a routine credit dispute regarding the unauthorized vendor line. They have 48 hours to produce the logs of who electronically signed your name to that credit application. They will stall. I said, "Let them." Elias said, "Stalling is evidence. If they claim the logs are corrupted, that is evidence. If they claim they lost them, that is evidence. We are building a box." Vivian, "And we are just waiting for them to walk into it." I drove home, taking the long way around the lake. I needed to see the water. I needed to remember that the world was big and Darlene Harrow was small. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Grant's truck. It was 2 p.m. He never came home this early. I walked into the kitchen. The counter, usually cluttered with mail, was cleared. In the center sat a massive vase of white peonies, my favorite flower. They were expensive, out of season, and looked like an apology. Grant was leaning against the sink, wearing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Surprise," he said. I put my keys down. "What is this?" "Grant?" "I took the afternoon off," he said, walking over to wrap his arms around me. I felt his body heat, the familiar scent of his cologne. A week ago, this would have felt like home. Now, it felt like being hugged by a wiretap. "I have been thinking," he said into my hair. "We have been so stressed lately. The dinner, my mom, your work. We need a reset." "A reset," I repeated, standing stiffly in his embrace. "I booked us a weekend at the cabin in Brown County," he said, pulling back to look at me. "Just us. No cell service. No moms. Just wine and fireflies and us. We leave Friday, the day Sobek promised an update, the day the bank logs were due. He wanted me out of town. He wanted me offline. It sounds lovely." "Grant," I said. I forced a smile. It felt like a physical exertion, lifting the corners of my mouth. "Good," he said. He kissed my forehead. "I just want peace. Viv, I hate it when we fight." He didn't want peace. He wanted silence. I played the part. I cooked dinner. I asked about his day. I let him touch me. I felt like a double agent in my own marriage, collecting data points while he passed the salt. Reason number 1. She is emotionally cold. I wasn't cold. I was frozen. There is a difference. That night, while Grant was in the shower, I logged into the new bank account I had opened 3 days ago at a national bank with no branches in Briar Glen. I initiated a transfer of 50% of our joint savings. It was a risk. It would trigger a notification on his phone, but I timed it carefully. I knew Grant. He never checked his notifications until the morning. By then, the transfer would be pending, and I would have an explanation ready. I was worried about identity theft. Grant, after the credit line issue, I thought we should diversify. It was the truth, weaponized. The next day, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Meet me at the old drive-in theater on Route 9. Noon. Please don't tell anyone. Marianne Holt." Marianne was the senior accountant at Harrow Ridge. She was a woman of few words, a spinster in the old-fashioned sense who lived for her cats and her immaculate ledgers. She had always been kind to me, in a quiet, invisible way. I drove to the old drive-in. It was a graveyard of speaker poles and weeds. Marianne's sedan was parked in the shadow of the rotting screen. She got out when she saw me. She looked terrified. She was wearing sunglasses and a scarf, as if she were a celebrity avoiding paparazzi, not an accountant in Indiana. "Vivian," she said, her voice trembling, "you shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here." "Marianne, what is going on?" I asked. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver flash drive. She pressed it into my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "Darlene is moving assets," Marianne whispered. "She is restructuring the company. She is creating a new entity called Harrow Ridge Holdings. That is normal business." I said, "Companies restructure all the time, not like this." Marianne said, "She is transferring the profitable assets, the patents, the land, the machinery, into the new holding company. But she is leaving the liabilities, the debts, the pending lawsuits, the bad vendor contracts, In the old company. And she is positioning you to be the director of the old company. I stared at her. The wind whipped my hair across my face. What? I saw the paperwork. Vivian, they are going to name you as the interim director of the legacy entity. They are going to say it is a promotion, a way to give you a stake in the family business. But once the assets are gone, they are going to declare bankruptcy on the old company, and I will be the captain of the sinking ship. I said, worse, Marianne said, the debt they are leaving behind? It includes the vendor line they opened in your name, and a dozen others like it. They are going to pin the financial mismanagement on you. They are going to say you drove the company into the ground while they saved the assets in the new trust. I gripped the flash drive. It felt hot in my palm. Why are you telling me this, Marianne? She looked away, toward the highway. Because I have a daughter, she said softly. She is 25, and if a man's mother ever did this to her, I would hope someone would tell her. She looked back at me. Tears were leaking from under her sunglasses. There is an email on there, she said, from Darlene to the legal team. The subject line is exit strategy. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. What does it say? It says, prepare for Vivian's exit narrative. Make sure the timeline aligns with her psychological decline. Exit narrative. They weren't just ending a marriage. They were writing a tragedy, and they had cast me as the villain who destroys herself. Thank you, Marianne. I said. I wanted to hug her, but she looked like she might shatter. Don't use my name, she begged. Please, I need this job. I have 5 years until retirement. I won't. I promised. She got into her car and drove away, leaving me standing in the wreckage of an old theater, holding the script to my own destruction. I didn't go home. I went to a coffee shop in the next county. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. I opened the folder labeled emails. There were hundreds of them. Darlene to Grant, Darlene to the lawyers, Darlene to Northbridge Reputation Partners. I read them. It was like watching an autopsy of my life while I was still breathing. Email dated August 12th. From Darlene Harrow to Grant Harrow. Subject, the problem, Grant. We cannot move forward with the trust vote while she is still a liability. If she has voting power, she can block the asset transfer. We need to neutralize her credibility before the gala. Email dated September 4th. From Marcus Vane, Northbridge. To Darlene Harrow. Subject, narrative arc. The instability angle is testing well. We need more documentation. Medical records would be ideal. Can we access her provider history? Email dated September 5th. From Grant Harrow. To Darlene Harrow. Subject, narrative arc. I can get her insurance login. She keeps it in the notebook in the kitchen. I stopped reading. I closed my eyes. Grant. He hadn't just stood by. He had provided the keys. I can get her login. I felt a grief so profound it felt like physical pain. I mourned the man I thought I married. I mourned the Sunday mornings. I mourned the future children we would never have. I mourned the version of myself who believed that if I was just polite enough, just successful enough, just good enough, his mother would eventually love me. I had been so stupid. Politeness wasn't a shield. It was a blindfold. I wiped my face. I opened the file again. I wasn't done. I went back to the 47 reasons. I had the photos on my desktop. I opened them side by side with the emails. I started connecting the dots. Reason 12, medical code, linked to the email about the insurance login. Reason 41, signatures, linked to the email about the vendor accounts. I scrolled down to reason 27. Reason number 27. She married Grant for leverage, intending to infiltrate the family governance structure. In the photo I had taken in the bathroom, there was a handwritten note in the margin next to this reason, Darlene's jagged cursive. She can't know about the trust until after the vote. The trust. Marianne had mentioned the asset transfer and the legacy entity, but she hadn't mentioned a trust. I called Elias. I said, "What is the Briar Glen Workforce Renewal Trust?" I heard him typing. "Give me a second. Vivian." The silence stretched. "Here it is," he said. "It was incorporated 3 weeks ago. It is a charitable trust. The stated purpose is community development and workforce training. Who are the trustees? I asked. Darlene Harrow is the chair. Elias read, Robert Harrow is the treasurer. And, hello? What? There is a community representative trustee listed. Elias said, Vivian Ann Bryant. I stopped breathing. I never agreed to that. I said, I never signed anything. It says here you accepted the appointment on January 2nd. Elias said, January 2nd. I was at work. Elias, I said, why would they want me on a trust? If they are moving assets into it, Elias said slowly, his lawyer brain working through the maze, and if those assets are being moved to avoid taxes or to defraud creditors of the old company, then the trustees are liable. I finished. Exactly. If the IRS or the SEC comes knocking, Darlene can say, I didn't know about the irregularities. The community representative approved the transfers. It was Vivian. I am the fall guy. I said, again, they were going to strip the company, hide the money in the trust, leave the debt in the old company under my name. And if anyone investigated the trust, they would find my signature all over the dirty laundry. It was perfect. It was a masterpiece of corporate malice. Elias, I said, how do I get off the trust? We can file a resignation, he said. But if we do that now, they will know you know. They will accelerate the timeline. They might file the guardianship petition tomorrow to stop you, so I have to stay on it. I said, for now, yes. But Vivian, this gives us leverage. How? Trustees have rights, Elias said. Trustees have the right to inspect the books. Trustees have the right to speak at the board meetings. Trustees have a fiduciary duty to the public. I looked at the calendar on my laptop, the Briar Glen Founders Gala. I said, what about it? I got an invitation in the mail yesterday. It is this Saturday. The invitation says, celebrating the launch of the Workforce Renewal Trust. That is where they are going to announce it. Elias said, and that is where they are going to introduce the trustees. I said, I could see the scene in my mind. Darlene on stage, wearing diamonds, Grant smiling his weak, boyish smile, and me, standing there, clapping like a seal while they announced the vehicle of my destruction. Or, Elias, I said, if I am a trustee, I have a right to speak at the launch, don't I? Technically, yes, he said. But Vivian, you said you wanted to avoid a scene. You said you wanted to be a statue. I am done being a statue. Elias, statues get pigeon shit on them. I am going to that gala, I said, and I am going to bring the packet. Which packet? The bank logs, the motel receipt, the metadata report, and the emails. Vivian. Elias warned, if you do this publicly, there is no going back. It is scorched earth. They already scorched the earth. Elias, I said, I am just standing in the ashes. I hung up. I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cornfields. I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone. The confusion was gone. I had the map. I knew exactly where I was going. When I walked into the house, Grant was in the living room, packing a duffel bag. Hey, he said, I am just getting ready for the weekend. Did you pack yet? I looked at the bag. He was packing his hiking boots. He was packing the flannel shirt I had bought him for his birthday. He looked so normal, so harmless. Grant, I said, I can't go this weekend. He stopped packing. He turned slowly. What? Why? Work, I said. The investigation. I have to stay close to the server. His face fell. But Viv, we need this. Mom is even okay with us skipping the pre-party for the gala. We can just come back Sunday morning for the main event. I walked over to him. I put my hand on his cheek. It was warm. I wondered if Judas had warm hands. I am sorry. Grant, I said, we can't go, but we will definitely be at the gala. He searched my face. He was looking for suspicion. He was looking for the instability his mother had promised him. But all he saw was his wife, smiling a tired, apologetic smile. Okay, he said, sighing. Okay, if you have to work, you have to work. but promise me you will relax at the gala. Mom is really working hard to make it perfect. Oh, I promise, I said. It is going to be unforgettable. I walked upstairs to my closet. I pushed aside the gray suits. I pushed aside the navy sheath dress. I reached into the back, where I kept the clothes I never wore. I pulled out a dress I had bought 3 years ago. It was red, a deep, blood-red silk. Darlene had seen it once and told me it was vulgar and attention-seeking. She had said, "Harrow women do not wear red." I held the dress up against my body in the mirror. I wasn't a Harrow woman. I was Vivian Bryant, and I was about to burn their house down. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the 47 Reasons one last time. Reason number 47. Darlene had written at the very end. She will never truly belong to us. She was right. I didn't belong to them. And after Saturday, they would wish they had never tried to own me. I looked at the date on my phone. 2 days until the gala. 2 days to memorize the emails. 2 days to prep Marianne. 2 days to learn exactly how to destroy a legacy in under 10 minutes. I closed the file. I was ready. The 48 hours leading up to the Briar Glen Founders Gala were not spent in a state of panic, but in a state of forensic rehearsal. I had turned the guest bedroom into a war room. The bed was covered in manila folders, each one labeled with a specific aspect of my defense: banking, medical, corporate. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, not checking my outfit, but checking my face. I practiced the expressions I would need: mild confusion, polite firmness, sorrowful realization. I had to be a chameleon. I had to look like the Vivian Bryant everyone expected, the quiet, slightly overwhelmed wife, until the precise moment I decided to stop. Tessa sat on the floor, her laptop glowing in the dim light. She was scrubbing the metadata of the files we intended to use, ensuring there was no digital fingerprint that could be traced back to a hack. We had to be clean. We had to be perfect. "You are sure about this?" Tessa asked, not looking up from her screen. "Once you pull this trigger, Vivian, you can't unpull it. This isn't just a divorce. This is a detonation." I looked at my reflection. I looked tired, but under the fatigue, there was something harder. I didn't build the bomb. "Tessa," I said, "Darlene did. I am just deciding where it goes off." We had coordinated with Elias Pruitt. He was preparing a separate legal packet to be filed with the county clerk first thing Monday morning, regardless of what happened at the gala. He had advised against the public confrontation. Of course, he was a lawyer. He believed in courtrooms. But he didn't understand the court of Briar Glen. If I won the legal battle but lost the narrative, I would still be the crazy ex-wife who ruined the Harrow family. I had to win the town first. I checked in with Marianne Holt. We met briefly in the parking lot of a grocery store 2 towns over. She looked terrified, clutching her purse to her chest. "I will testify if I have to," Marianne said, her voice shaking. "But please don't make me do it unless it is the only way. Darlene, she knows people. She can make it so I never work in this state again. You won't have to say a word. Marianne, I promised. I just need you to be there. I need you to be in the room. Your presence is the leverage. Darlene knows you know where the bodies are buried. If she sees you sitting there, she will know she can't lie without risking perjury." Marianne nodded, swallowing hard. "I will be there. Row 4, seat 12. The pieces were moving into place, but the emotional toll was heavier than the logistical one. On Thursday afternoon, I went to the local pharmacy to pick up a prescription for migraines. Real ones. This time, while I was waiting, I ran into Aunt Carol, Darlene's younger sister. She was a softer, flightier version of Darlene, the kind of woman who meant well but trafficked in gossip like it was currency. "Vivian!" she exclaimed, reaching out to touch my arm. "Oh, honey, you look tired." "I am fine." "Carol," I said, "just working hard." Carol lowered her voice, leaning in past the display of vitamins. "Grant told us you are going through a bit of a rough patch," she whispered. "He said you have been so stressed with the job that you are getting confused about things, losing time, Forgetting conversations. My blood ran cold. He said that? I asked. He is just worried about you. Dear, Carol said soothingly. He said you have been having these moods. We are all praying for you. Darlene even mentioned she knows a wonderful specialist in Indianapolis if you need a referral. I felt a numbness spread through my limbs. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. Grant wasn't just passive, he was active. He was planting the seeds, losing time, forgetting conversations. He was pre-explaining my defense. If I stood up and said I never signed that, the town would nod and say, "Poor Vivian. She forgets things." "Thank you, Carol," I said. My voice was steady. "It is nice to know the family is talking about me." I walked out of the pharmacy without my medication. I didn't need pills. I needed to look my husband in the eye. I texted Grant. "Meet me at the Roasted Bean. 30 minutes. We need to talk about the weekend." I chose a coffee shop because it was public, neutral ground. When I arrived, he was already there, nursing a latte. He looked handsome in his flannel shirt, the very picture of the concerned, rugged husband. "Hey," he said, standing up to kiss my cheek. I dodged him, taking my seat on the opposite side of the small table. "Everything okay?" he asked. Sitting back down, "You seemed urgent." I folded my hands on the table. "Grant," I said, "I want to ask you one question, and I want you to answer it without thinking." He blinked. "Okay, shoot. Did you know my name was on that safe deposit box with your mother?" The question hung in the air between us, suspended over the smell of roasted beans and cinnamon. Grant didn't flinch. He didn't look shocked. He looked down at his coffee cup. He rotated it slowly, 90 degrees to the left, then 90 degrees back. He hesitated. 1 second, 2 seconds. "I didn't ask," he said finally. I stared at him. "You didn't ask." I repeated. "Mom handles the administrative stuff." "Viv," he said, his voice taking on that familiar defensive whine. "She said she needed to secure some documents. She said it was better if everything was consolidated." I didn't ask for the details. I figured it was easier not to know. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me, and it shattered me more than a lie would have. If he had said yes, he would be a villain. If he had said no, he would be a fool. But I didn't ask made him a coward. He knew something was wrong. He knew his mother didn't do consolidating without an agenda, but he chose blindness because blindness was comfortable. He traded my safety for his peace of mind. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with for 5 years. I saw the weakness in his jawline, the avoidance in his eyes. He wasn't trapped between 2 women. He was hiding behind one to avoid dealing with the other. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay?" he asked, looking up, hopeful. "So we are good? We are clear." "Grant," I said. He took that as forgiveness. I meant it as a final verdict. I left him there and went straight to Elias's office. I needed to see the trust documents again. I sat in the leather chair while Elias pulled up the file. "Scroll down to the removal clause," I said. Elias scrolled. Article 5, Section 2, Removal of Trustees. Any trustee may be removed by a majority vote of the board or by the chair unilaterally in the event that said trustee engages in conduct that causes reputational harm to the trust, creates public scandal, or demonstrates financial incapacity. There it was, the trap. And look at the next line. I said, "In the event of a removal under Section 2, the chair shall have the sole authority to appoint a successor trustee." It was a perfect circle. Step 1. Appoint Vivian without her knowledge. Step 2. Frame Vivian for financial instability. The credit line. The shell company accusation at work. Step 3. Publicly remove Vivian for reputational harm. Step 4. Darlene appoints a new trustee, someone she controls completely, and the assets are moved. Washed clean of the debt left in the old company, and I would be left with the wreckage, the fired consultant, the unstable wife, the disgraced trustee. I need to send an email. "Elias," I said. "To whom?" "To Northbridge Reputation Partners." Elias frowned. "Vivian, Direct contact might trigger them. I want to trigger them. I said, I want them to know I am looking. I opened my laptop. I drafted the email. Subject: Data subject. Access request. V. Bryant. To Legal Northbridge Partners. Com. To whom it may concern. Pursuant to applicable data privacy laws, I am formally requesting a copy of all personal data held by your firm regarding Vivian Ann Bryant, including but not limited to internal correspondence, strategy documents referencing my name, and any surveillance logs. Please be advised that I'm aware of unauthorized access to my employment records by a subcontractor previously affiliated with your firm. Failure to comply within the statutory timeframe will result in immediate legal escalation. Sincerely, Vivian Bryant. It was a bluff. We didn't have a subpoena yet, but using the phrase subcontractor previously affiliated would set off alarm bells. It told them, I know about Kevin Miller. I know about the hack. I hit send. Now we wait. I said. Friday morning arrived with a gray, heavy sky. I was drinking tea in the kitchen when my phone rang. It was David Sobek from Redwood and Vale. Vivian. He said, David, we finished the preliminary audit of the server logs. He said, his voice was clipped, professional, but I could hear the apology underneath. And? You were right, he said. The metadata on the PDFs submitted with the complaint confirms they were created on a machine external to our network. Specifically, a machine registered to a corporate license for Harrow Ridge fabrication. Furthermore, the IP address used to submit the complaint matches a VPN endpoint that we have traced back to. Well, it traces back to a firm in Chicago, Northbridge. I closed my eyes. The relief was so intense it made me dizzy. So I am cleared? I asked. You are cleared. Vivian, the investigation into you is closed. However, we are opening an external investigation into the malicious filing. Our legal team is very interested in why a crisis management firm would be trying to frame one of our senior consultants. Thank you. David, I said. I hung up. I put my head down on the kitchen counter and breathed. I wasn't going to lose my job. I wasn't going to lose my license. They hadn't taken my income, but the relief was quickly replaced by a cold, hard rage. They had tried to destroy my career, my livelihood, the thing I had built with 15 years of late nights and airport terminals. They treated my profession like it was just a pawn in their family game. Darlene didn't care if I starved. She didn't care if I was blacklisted. She wanted me broken. I lifted my head. I am not breaking. I whispered, that evening. Darlene invited us over for a pre-gala family toast. Grant was nervous. Be nice, Viv, he kept saying as we drove up the hill. Just get through tonight. The house was lit up like a fortress. Darlene met us at the door, wearing a cashmere wrap and a smile that showed too many teeth. Vivian, she cried, you look rested. Thank you. Darlene, I said. We went into the study. Robert was there, pouring scotch. He nodded at me, then looked away. He knew. He had to know. He was the treasurer, but he was just as weak as his son. After a few minutes of strained conversation about the weather, Darlene set her glass down. Grant, Robert, why don't you two go check on the patio heaters? She suggested. I want to have a girl talk with Vivian. Grant looked at me. I gave him a small nod. Go. They left. Darlene walked over to the desk and picked up a folder. Vivian, she said, I want to be frank with you. Please do. I said. I know things have been tense, she said, and I know you are struggling. Grant tells me you are having a hard time distinguishing reality from stress lately. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. We want to help you, Darlene said, but we also need to protect the family. The trust launch tomorrow is very important. We can't have any unpredictability. She slid the folder across the desk. What is this? I asked. It is a post-nuptial agreement, she said, and a resignation letter. I looked at the papers. It says here that I agree to resign from any and all positions associated with Harrow Ridge, I read, and that I waive any claim to future assets in exchange for... I looked at the number. A one-time payment of $50,000. I finished. It is a generous offer, Darlene said. Considering the situation, considering the debt you have incurred, the debt you faked. I thought, and, she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, if you sign this, Vivian, I can make sure the rumors stop. I can make sure that the questions about your mental health just disappear. People listen to me. If I say you are well, you are well. I looked at her. She really believed it. She believed she owned the truth. She saw her reputation not as a reflection of character, but as a utility she could turn on and off. She was extortioning me with my own sanity. I looked at the pen lying on the desk. I need to think about it. Darlene, I said, of course. She said, you have until tomorrow morning. Bring it to the gala, signed, and we can all celebrate together. I stood up. I will see you at the gala. Darlene. I walked out. I didn't say goodbye to Grant. I walked to the car and waited. When Grant finally came out, he looked hopeful. Did you guys talk? He asked. We talked. I said, good. That is good. Saturday. The gala. I spent the morning in silence. Grant went to the golf course, his way of avoiding the tension. I spent the time preparing my packet. I folded the 47 reasons list. I placed it in my clutch. I put the bank logs, the motel receipt, and the metadata report into a slim envelope. I put that in my clutch too. Then I got dressed. Darlene had expected me to wear something muted, something apologetic. I put on the red silk dress. It was a column of crimson that fitted me like a second skin. It was bold. It was loud. It was the dress of a woman who demands to be seen. I put on my grandmother's sapphire earrings. I put on my heels. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a reckoning. When Grant came home and saw me, he stopped in the hallway. Wow. He said, that is bright. Is it too much? I asked innocently. No, he stammered. It is just, Mom usually likes us to coordinate. Neutral tones. I am tired of neutral. Grant, I said. We drove to the Briar Glen Country Club. The parking lot was full of luxury cars. The air smelled of expensive perfume and charcoal grills. We walked in. The ballroom was transformed. Heavy drapery, crystal centerpieces, a stage set up with a podium and the Harrow Ridge logo. Darlene was everywhere, greeting the mayor, laughing with the bank president. She saw me enter in the red dress, and her eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance, but she covered it quickly. Vivian, she called out, waving us over. So glad you made it. She kissed the air next to my cheek. Did you bring the papers? She whispered in my ear. I patted my clutch. Everything I need is right here. She smiled. Good girl. She thought I meant the post-nup. She thought I had capitulated. The night was a blur of handshakes and fake smiles. I saw Marianne Holt in the fourth row. She looked pale, but she nodded at me. I saw Mrs. Gable from the bank, looking uncomfortable near the bar. I saw the traps everywhere. Dinner was served. I didn't eat. I drank water. Then, the lights dimmed. Darlene walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit her. She looked regal, the benevolent matriarch. Welcome, friends, family, neighbors, she began. Her voice was amplified, warm and commanding. Tonight is a historic night for Briar Glen. For generations, the Harrow family has been committed to this town, and tonight, we cement that legacy. She spoke for 10 minutes about duty, about charity, about the future, and then came the pivot. We are launching the Briar Glen Workforce Renewal Trust, she announced, a vehicle to give back. And this trust is not just about money, it is about people, it is about family. She looked out into the crowd. She found me in the darkness. I would like to invite my daughter-in-law, Vivian Bryant, to the stage, she said. The crowd applauded politely. My stomach dropped. This wasn't in the script she had given me. This was an ambush. Vivian has been going through a difficult time lately, Darlene said into the microphone. Her voice dripped with fake sympathy. but she insisted on being here tonight to support the family. "Come up, Vivian. Stand with us." She was baiting me. If I refused, I looked unstable. If I went up, she would control the moment, maybe make me sign something, or just use me as a silent prop to validate the trust. Grant nudged me. "Go on, Viv. Don't make a scene." I stood up. The red dress rustled. I walked to the stairs. The spotlight followed me. I walked up the steps. Darlene was smiling, holding out a hand. She expected me to take it, to stand silently by her side while she finished her coronation. I walked past her hand. I walked directly to the podium. Darlene's smile faltered. I reached for the microphone. I leaned in. "Thank you." "Darlene," I said. My voice was steady. It echoed through the massive room. The room went quiet. Darlene took a half step toward me, her eyes widening. "I am so honored to be here." I continued. "Darlene talks so often about family, about honesty, about the things we owe to one another." I reached into my clutch. I pulled out the folded cream-colored paper. "In fact, Darlene wrote something very moving recently about family responsibility," I said, "and I think it is important that we share it tonight. As we launch this trust based on integrity." Darlene froze. She recognized the paper. She recognized the wax seal remnant on the back. "Vivian," she hissed. "Off mic. Don't." I unfolded the pages. "She calls this 47 Reasons," I said to the crowd. A ripple of laughter went through the room. They thought it was a joke, a roast, a funny mother-in-law speech. I smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile. "Reason number 1. I read, she is emotionally cold." More laughter. Grant was standing at the foot of the stage, looking confused. "Reason number 3. I read, she is socially embarrassing." I looked at Darlene. She was paralyzed. She couldn't grab the mic without causing the scene she was trying to avoid. She was trapped in her own decorum. "Reason number 12. I read," my voice dropping the pleasantry. "Her medical history indicates instability, specifically noted in billing code F41.1. The laughter died instantly. "Reason number 23. I continued, my voice gaining power. "She was the subject of a confidential HR mediation regarding the Peterson account." "Reason number 34. I read, she maintains a secret safe deposit box at Briar Glen Community Bank. Box number 402. The room was deadly silent now. The tension was thick enough to choke on. This wasn't a roast. This was a violation. I looked up from the paper. I looked directly at the camera recording the event. "Reason number 41. I said clearly, her signature never matches twice." I paused. I held up the paper. When Darlene gave me this list, I thought they were just insults. I said, I thought they were just the opinions of a mother who didn't like her son's choice. I reached into my clutch again. I pulled out the packet, the bank logs, the motel receipt, the metadata report. But then I looked closer. I said, and I realized something. I looked at the bank president in the front row. I looked at the mayor. "These aren't opinions," I said. "They are timestamps." Darlene lunged for the microphone. "Cut the feed!" she screamed. But it was too late. I had the room, and I wasn't letting go. The silence in the ballroom was not empty. It was heavy, a physical weight that pressed down on the 300 guests in their tuxedos and gowns. The air conditioning hummed, a low mechanical drone that seemed to underscore the sudden cessation of polite conversation. Darlene stood a few feet away from me, her hand frozen halfway to the microphone she had tried to snatch. Her chest was heaving. The spotlight caught the diamonds at her throat, making them glitter like cold, hard eyes. I did not move. I did not step back. I held the cream-colored paper in one hand and the microphone in the other. I felt the heat of the stage lights on my skin, but inside, I was cool. I was a statue made of ice and evidence. "You think this is a game," Darlene hissed, her voice low enough that the microphone didn't pick it up, but loud enough for Grant to hear at the bottom of the steps. "You are embarrassing yourself. You are proving my point." I turned back to the crowd. I looked at the camera at the back of the room. the red tally light still glowing. The feed had not been cut. The technician in the booth was likely too stunned to move. Or perhaps, like everyone else in Briar Glen, he was tired of Darlene Harrow telling him what to do. I apologize for the interruption. I said into the microphone. My voice was calm, conversational, the voice of a consultant presenting a quarterly report. Darlene is worried about my health. She has been very vocal about her concerns regarding my stability. That is actually the theme of the document I am holding. I lifted the list again. But you see, there is a discrepancy. I continued. Darlene claims this list is a collection of observations about my character. She calls me paranoid. She calls me secretive. But when I analyzed the data, I found something else. I opened the slim envelope I had taken from my clutch. I pulled out the metadata report. Reason number 12. I said, the medical billing code. Darlene cited code F411 from a visit to Dr. Aris Thorne on November 14th. I held up the report. I have here a server log from my health insurance provider. It shows that on September 5th, at 2 in the afternoon, my account was accessed from an external IP address. That address is registered to the administrative offices of Harrow Ridge Fabrication, specifically, the terminal in the executive suite. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw heads turn toward Robert Harrow, who was sitting at the head table, looking as if he wished the floor would open up and swallow him. I pulled out another paper. Reason number 34, I said. The safe deposit box. Darlene claims I am financially secretive because I have a private box, but I have here the access log from Briar Glen Community Bank. It shows that on August 3rd, Darlene Harrow was added as a joint signer to my box. I looked directly at Mr. Sterling, the bank president, who was sitting in the front row. He was frozen, his wine glass halfway to his mouth. Mr. Sterling, I said politely, I never signed a card authorizing that addition. In fact, the signature on the card, which I have a copy of right here, is dated August 3rd. On August 3rd, I was in Seattle for a logistics conference. Mr. Sterling set his glass down. It made a sharp clink against the table. He turned to his wife and whispered something urgent. He looked pale. He knew exactly what it meant when a bank allowed unauthorized access to a federal institution's secure storage. It meant federal audits. It meant fines. It meant the end of a reputation. Darlene couldn't take it anymore. She lunged forward again, this time grabbing the podium. "That is enough!" she shouted. Her voice cracked, shrill and desperate. She leaned into the microphone. "Overriding me. Please, everyone," she pleaded, sweeping her arm across the room. "You have to understand. Vivian is not well. This is exactly what we were afraid of. She is delusional. She concocts these conspiracies because she cannot handle the pressure of being in this family." I stepped back. I let her have the microphone. I let her have the stage. It was the most important move I made all night. If I had fought her for it, we would have looked like two bickering women. By stepping back, I became the observer. She became the aggressor. "She is twisting everything," Darlene cried, her composure fracturing like dropped glass. "We have been trying to help her. We paid for her doctors. We tried to keep her employment secure even when she was stealing from her own company." She stopped. She realized too late that she had just accused me of a crime in front of 300 witnesses. I stepped forward again. I didn't take the mic back. I just leaned in, close enough that it picked up my voice. "Stealing?" I asked softly. "Yes," Darlene spat. "You think we don't know about the shell company? You think we don't know about the embezzlement? We were trying to protect you from prison, you ungrateful girl." I looked out at the audience. I found row 4. Marianne Holt was sitting there. She was wearing a simple gray dress. She looked terrified. But when our eyes met, she sat up straighter. "I think there is someone here who might have a different perspective on that." I pointed to the 4th row. "Marianne Holt is the senior accountant at Harrow Ridge." I said, "She has been with the company for 20 years. Darlene's head snapped toward the audience. She saw Marianne. "Marianne," I said, my voice projecting clearly. "Is it true that Darlene instructed the legal team to prepare an exit narrative for me? Is it true That there are emails with the subject line "Exit Strategy" discussing how to frame me for the debt being left behind in the old company? Marianne didn't speak. She didn't have to. She slowly reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. She held it up. It was a small, silver object. But in that room, it looked like a gun. Darlene made a noise that sounded like a strangled gasp. She looked from Marianne to me. She realized the circle had closed. Grant, who had been standing at the foot of the stairs, suddenly vaulted onto the stage. He rushed toward me, his face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and panic. "Vivian, stop," he hissed, reaching for my arm. "Come on, we are leaving." He tried to steer me away from the podium, his grip tight on my elbow. "This isn't the place." "Viv," he whispered urgently, "this isn't the place for this." I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked at his face. The face I had loved, the face I had trusted. I pulled my arm away. It wasn't a violent motion. It was a release. "You made it the place." "Grant," I said. My voice was amplified, booming through the silent ballroom. Grant froze. "You made it the place when you let her do it the first time." I said, "You made it the place when you sat at that dinner table and let her read a dossier about your wife and said nothing. You made it the place when you gave her my insurance passwords." Grant recoiled, as if I had slapped him. "I didn't," he stammered. I turned back to the crowd. I wasn't done. "Darlene says she wanted to protect me." I said, "She says I'm unstable. But reason number 41 on her list says my signature never matches twice." I looked at Mr. Sterling again. That was the key. I said, "Because when I investigated that claim, I found a business line of credit opened in my name, V.A. Bryant, at Harrow Ridge Vendor Services. A line of credit I never signed for. A line of credit that has $50,000 of debt on it. I saw the board chair of the gala, a formidable woman named Eleanor Vance, stand up at her table. She was watching Darlene with a look of absolute horror. And that brings us to tonight," I said, "to the Briar Glen Workforce Renewal Trust." I picked up the glossy program that had been left on every seat. I held it up. "This trust is being presented as a gift to the community." I said, "A legacy. But if you look at the filing documents, which I pulled from the public record yesterday, you will see a familiar name listed as a trustee." I dropped the program, "Vivian Ann Bryant." I turned to Darlene. She was shaking now, her hands clutching the podium for support. "I never agreed to be a trustee. Darlene," I said, "I never signed the acceptance letter." Darlene's mouth opened and closed. "So who signed it?" I asked. "Who forged my signature on a federal trust document? Was it to give me a voice? Or was it to make sure that when the IRS investigates the asset transfers from the old company, my name is the one on the checks?" The room erupted. It wasn't applause. It was the low, angry rumble of a crowd realizing they had been played. These were business owners, lawyers, doctors. They understood fraud. They understood liability. And they understood that they were sitting in a room celebrating a crime. Darlene looked around wildly. She saw the faces of her friends, her neighbors, her social circle. They weren't looking at her with admiration anymore. They were looking at her with distance. "I had to," she screamed. The room went silent again. "I had to protect the family," Darlene yelled. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You don't belong here. You never belonged here. You are weak. You would have ruined everything we built." The word hung in the air. Protect. She hadn't denied the forgery. She hadn't denied the frame-up. She had justified it. I had to protect the family. She had just confessed to motive, intent, and execution in front of the entire town. I looked at her. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt a strange, hollow pity. She was a woman who had built a castle out of fear and called it love. "Thank you for clarifying." "Darlene," I said. I placed the microphone gently on the podium. It made a soft thud. I turned to walk away. Eleanor Vance, the board chair, walked up to the stage. She didn't look at Darlene. She walked straight to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice crisp and icy, in light of the information presented, and the statements made by Mrs. Harrow. The board is suspending the launch of the trust effective immediately. There was a gasp from the back of the room. We will be initiating a full external review of the governance documents. Eleanor continued. Please enjoy the rest of your dinner, or perhaps it is best if we call it a night. Darlene stood there. She looked small. The spotlight seemed to be burning her. She looked at Robert, but he had his head in his hands. She looked at Grant, but he was staring at the floor. She was alone. The Queen of Briar Glen had just been deposed in her own palace. I walked down the stairs. The crowd parted for me. People actually stepped back to create a path. They didn't look at me with pity. They looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. I was the woman who had burned it down. I walked through the double doors and out into the cool night air. The valet stand was quiet. The crickets were chirping, indifferent to the destruction inside. I handed my ticket to the valet. Vivian! Grant came running out of the doors. His tuxedo was disheveled, his tie crooked. He looked like a little boy who had lost his mother at the mall. Vivian. Wait. I stopped. I didn't turn around. He ran around to face me. He was breathless. Viv, you can't just leave, he said. We have to fix this. Fix it? I asked. Mom is in shock. He said, I don't know what Dad is doing, but we can't let it end like this. We can spin it. We can say it was a misunderstanding. I stared at him. He was still doing it. He was still managing the image. Grant, I said, I just accused your mother of federal fraud in front of the mayor. There is no spin. We can handle it privately, he begged. Please, just come home. We will sit down. We will talk. I will make her apologize. I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. You will make her apologize? I asked. Grant, you couldn't even make her stop reading a list of insults at dinner. You think you can make her apologize for a felony? I can change, he said. I will stand up to her. I promise. It is too late. Grant. The valet pulled up in my car. He got out and held the door open. He looked at me, then at Grant, and kept his eyes averted. I am not coming home. Grant, I said. Where are you going? He asked, panic rising in his voice. I booked a room at the Marriott in Oakhaven. I said, Viv, please, I am staying there tonight. I said, tomorrow morning, I am meeting with Elias Pruitt to file for divorce, and I'm turning over the flash drive, the bank logs, and the recording of tonight to the district attorney. Grant went pale. The district attorney? Viv. That is family. No, Grant. I said, that is the law. I got into the car. I adjusted the seat. I looked at him one last time through the open window. He stood there under the awning, bathed in the yellow light, looking at the ruin of his life. He looked lonely. Goodbye. Grant, I said. I rolled up the window. I put the car in drive. I pulled out of the country club lot, past the rows of Mercedes and BMWs, past the sign that said Harrow Ridge, a legacy of excellence. I turned onto the main road. The streetlights flickered in the rhythm I knew so well. I reached over to the passenger seat and picked up the red clutch. I opened it and took out the phone. I dialed a number. Tessa, I said when she answered. Did you do it? She asked. I did it. Are you okay? I took a deep breath. The air in the car smelled of leather and freedom. I am more than okay. I said, I am done. I drove toward the highway, leaving the lake, the mansion, and the Harrows in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me anymore. My name was Vivian Bryant, and for the first time in 5 years, that name belonged entirely to me. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed Vivian's journey from silence to vindication. It is a reminder that the truth has a weight of its own, and sometimes you just have to step back and let it fall. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you in a bustling city, a quiet town like Briar Glen, or somewhere in between? Please leave a comment and let me know. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories. I have many more tales of justice, betrayal, and the long road to redemption waiting for you. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Vivian did the right thing by exposing Darlene publicly? Or should she have handled it quietly? Share your opinions in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time.